Hi. How's everybody? Good. Yeah. No, I cut my own hair. I didn't get it. I did it. Yeah. I think my neighbors thought I was crazy because I usually use my wife's side mirror on her because it usually sits in the garage, but the garage is full of junk, so it's out front. So I put an extension cord on my shaver, and I was standing in my driveway cutting my hair with the wind blowing, You know how it was? Yeah, I was kind of thankful for the wind part, but for that. No, my mom used to get my hair cut by a hairdresser. This is 29 years ago, right? Donetta was her name. It's the last person who ever cut my hair besides me. Oh, I don't. That's not that significant, but anyway. Okay, so we'll be in chapter 20 tonight of the book of Judges, and if you have the map 4-1, which is the first map we showed, just the tribal allotments, that can be helpful just to kind of get perspective on the tribe of Benjamin and where these things are happening. And then also 4-9. That map covers sort of the end of the whole book of Judges. So you've got the story of the Levite and the concubine. You've got the story of the current story that we're in now, and later, of course, the book of Ruth. So I think when we get done with this, it's going to be helpful just to have an overview of Ruth. We did Ruth, maybe a year and a half ago or two, something like that. Anyway, just do an overview because it's a nice story to takes us back into Judges and gives you some more messianic impulses. So, all right, Judges chapter 20 tonight. Let's just take a moment and get in fellowship with the Lord if we need to. 1 John 1:9, we all know the drill, right? And the Lord is faithful to His promises, so let's claim one right now. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your truth. We thank you that this period of Scripture is recorded in history, so we see how quickly apostasy takes place, even just one generation after Joshua. It's remarkable to see that the human heart is definitely desperately wicked, and who can know it? And it quickly forgets the commandments, neglects you and forsakes you, and turns away from you. And how important it is to have faithful Bible teaching and believers who will exercise positive volition to your word so that they are intaking Bible doctrine, so that they can have something built up in their soul as a bulwark against the dangers of the sin nature, the dangers of the world, the dangers of the flesh, all these influences and avenues that result in sin. We ask, Lord, that your word would be built up within us so that we may not sin against you as they did in the time of the judges in deplorable, almost unbelievable situations, but certainly ones that believers are capable of if they neglect you, forsake you, forget you. So we ask that we would remember, just as in communion says that we take it to remember, to put the cross at the forefront of our mind so that we don't forget. And we ask all these things in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Okay, so the last three chapters of Judges all go together. They're all one story, Judges 19, 20, 21. I like to do all these together, but I'm just not capable. I think that's too much information. So tonight in chapter 20 is just going to be a continuation of the story in chapter 19. And all of this is the second story in what I call and has been called the Bethlehem Trilogy. There are three stories that begin toward the end of Judges about Bethlehem, which is super interesting because we've all heard lots of Christmas stories and lessons, especially in December, about the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem and all of that. But how many of those came from the pages of Judges or Ruth? Probably not any of them. To be frank with you, I've taught them for 18, 19 years in a row, and I don't think I taught any of them from Judges or Ruth. But Judges and Ruth have 3 different stories, all tied to Bethlehem. And the first one is chapter 17 and 18. It's a story about a Levite who comes out of Bethlehem who's an opportunist. He wasn't even supposed to be in Bethlehem. And he becomes a priest, and he wasn't supposed to function as a priest. He was just simply to be a Bible teacher. But he becomes a personal priest of a man, and then takes the bait and takes a bigger ministry, a bigger priesthood for the whole tribe of Dan, who moved all the way to the north of Israel. So they rejected their tribal allotment that the Lord gave them, and they went north, and he went with them, so he could have a bigger ministry and more money and who knows what else. Okay, now the second story is the one we're studying right now, and that is in chapter 17, which began with the Levite. And he went down to Bethlehem to get his concubine who had returned to her father's house. So her father is from Bethlehem. And remember, he went to the father's house, and the father showed him hospitality and kept trying to keep him there for more and more days. And after 4.5 days, he finally was like, look, we got to go. Okay, we're going to go back to Ephraim. And so he left, and rather than stay at Jebus, which we know is Jerusalem, but at the time Jebus was the city controlled by Jebusites until the time of David. So instead of staying there, which he considered to be a pagan city, they went on to the next city of Gabia, which was another 3 miles down the road, and they didn't have anybody offer him hospitality, and they were going to end up staying in the square until an old man who was living there temporarily from Ephraim invited them and said, hey, you can't stay here. It's just not safe. And so took him into his home. And of course, then all these men of the city started to surround the house. And the story turns very much like Sodom and Gomorrah, which is exactly what happened when the 2 angelic visitors came to Sodom, right? The men of the city surrounded the house and then wanted to basically homosexually rape them. And the people in the house said, oh no, we've got these virgins, take them, And it's a terrible, terrible, terrible story. So that's where we are in the story. They took the concubine of this Levite, and all night long they ravaged her, and she returned the next morning, and she basically died on the door sill, right, of the front steps. And we... Then the Levite took her home, right, cut her into 12 pieces and sent a piece to each of the 12 tribes of Israel. So this is the second story that includes Bethlehem, okay? But obviously, Bethlehem doesn't play into this part of the story, but it does have a place in the overall story. And so I don't want you to forget about Bethlehem in this story. Bethlehem in this story was the place where they received hospitality. Gabia was the place where they received no hospitality. And then Ruth 1 through 4 will be the final story in the Bethlehem Trilogy, and it's going to discuss the lineage of the Messiah himself. So it's much more particular. It's going to show that he actually will descend from one who comes out of Bethlehem. And we all know that, right, from Micah 5:2, that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. But this is much, much, much earlier in history than Micah. So very interesting to see this trilogy. So, at this point, at any rate, in this story, Judges 19, we have seen the concubine has been ravaged, she's dead. He cut her into 12 pieces and sent various parts throughout the territory of Israel. And everybody at the end of chapter 19 and verse 30 said, nothing like this has ever happened or been seen from the day when the sons of Israel came up from the land of Egypt to this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak up. Which is perhaps the worst commentary on Israel in the entire Old Testament. Nothing like this has happened. It's as if Gabia, it's as if Israel had become Sodom. And so the question at the end of the chapter is basically, what are they going to do? Take counsel and speak up. So what are they going to do? Are they going to obey the Mosaic law in this case, or are they going to do what is right in their own eyes? I think you can guess what they're going to end up doing, knowing enough about the book to know that the key phrase of the book is there was no king in Israel at that time. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. And we get to see how well that works tonight. Okay? So chapter 20 we come to. Then all the sons of Israel from Dan to Beersheba. Okay, this is the first time this merism is used. Merism is just a figure of speech. And it is here a reference to all of Israel. Dan to Beersheba. And it will happen over and over in the Old Testament. Okay? So Dan was formerly the city of Laish, and the Danites rejected their inheritance the Lord had given them. They went far north. Remember, this is a few chapters ago. And they defeated this people that were living basically isolated in the city of Laish, and they renamed the city Dan. So that is the far north of Israel. And of course, you can see it on the map way up. Well, pencil's not working. But way up at the top of the map. So that's the north of Israel. Beersheba is way in the south of Israel. Okay, next to the word Simeon, just west of the word Simeon, Beersheba. And I've been there 3 times. Been to Dan too. Dan's beautiful. I can see why they wanted to live there. It's gorgeous. You're at the foothills of Mount Hermon. You've got these waters just flowing through, and there's a beautiful creek. We took this hike up there, and they said take 1 bottle of water and drink the bottle of the water on the way up. And when we get to the river that's coming through Dan, you'll have finished that bottle. Just dip your bottle in the water and take the water, and it's fresh and it's clear and it's clean, and that'll be your water bottle for the way back. And we did that. And you say, well, I'm afraid to do that. I'm going to get some giardia or something, some parasite. And it was no worry. I mean, this is super fresh water, super clean. I can understand why they want to live there. But at any rate, that's Dan to Beersheba. It's a merism to refer to all of Israel. So in verse 1, all the sons of Israel from north to south, including the land of Gilead. Now that's Transjordan. That's the other side of the Jordan, right? Remember, 2.5 tribes settled on the other side of the Jordan. They were, and you can see them here, Reuben, Gad, and half of the tribe of Manasseh, because half is on the west side and half is on the east side. So all of Israel, including those Transjordan on the other side, came out, and the congregation assembled as one man to the Lord at Mizpah. Now you're going to see that phrase as one man in verse 1. You're going to see it again in verse 8. Then all the people arose as one man. Then you're going to see it again in verse 11. Thus all the men of Israel gathered against the city, united as one man. This is the last time you will ever see all of Israel united as one man in the period of the Judges, which shows that this is early on in the period of the Judges. And we will learn, in fact, that this was very early in the period of Judges, because Phinehas, in verse 28, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, Aaron's son, was the high priest at that time. So that's only 2 generations from Aaron. This is Aaron's grandson. Aaron was there at the Exodus, right? So that's 1446. So then you have the second generation, Eleazar, and now you have Phinehas. So we cannot be that far at all into the Judges period. We are somewhere around the mid-1300s. So this whole section happened very early and not long at all after Joshua's death. And it shows you how quickly they went apostate. Okay? So they are united as one man. And again, that's the last time you'll see them united. Later, under Jephthah, they're fighting one another, and so they are not united after this. But at this point, at least 11 of the tribes are assembled in a united fashion. And they assembled to the Lord at Mizpah. Okay. Some people think that Mizpah is where the tabernacle was at this time. You can see Mizpah on the 4-9 map. You've got Gabia in red there, and that's where the fighting will take place. Just north of that, you see Mizpah as a little blue arrow. It's pointing down, actually, toward Gabia. But up, you'll see only probably It can't be more than 4 or 5 miles to Mizpah. And some people think that that this is where the tabernacle was for some reason at that time. Now, this is in Benjamin's territory, Mizpah. So if all the 11 tribes, let's say, are gathering there, do you think Benjamin would know about it? Well, of course they're going to know about it. But apparently they did not gather. They did not send any representatives. They did not attend this meeting. Now, that leaves a lot of questions to be answered, but we don't know the answers to them all. Why didn't they assemble? Verse 2, the chiefs of all the people, even of all the tribes of Israel, took their stand in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 foot soldiers who drew the sword. I would call that united. That's a huge army. It's not as large as the army that came out at the Exodus. It's not as large as the army that began the conquest. That was an army of about 600,000 men. So it's very clear that they have been through the conquest and they have had, men killed. Okay, but the armies of these 11 tribes constitute about 400,000 foot soldiers. In verse 3, now the sons of Benjamin heard that the sons of Israel had gone up to Mizpah. Well, yeah, it was in their territory. And the sons of Israel said, tell us, how did this wickedness take place? In other words, how could such a thing happen in the tribe of Benjamin? So they are inquiring, and this was what the law of Moses said. This is what they were to do. Deuteronomy 13, verse 14. So just hold your place here and turn to Deuteronomy 13, verse 14, so you can see the proper procedure they are supposed to follow under the Mosaic law in this situation. Because the big question is, what are they going to do? Are they going to do what the law says, or are they going to do what is right in their own eyes? Okay? They want to know why these pieces of this woman came to them, which is a very strange thing to get in the mail. Deuteronomy 13, verse 14. Well, verse 12. If you hear in one of your cities which the Lord your God is giving you to live in, anyone saying, hey, there's some worthless men have gone out from you and seduced the inhabitants of their city, saying, let us go and serve other gods whom you've not known. Now, that's not exactly what happened, but in a way it is, because what happened in the city shows that they had been thoroughly Canaanized. They were worshiping other gods, so in a sort of backhanded way they were. Verse 14, then you shall investigate and search out and inquire thoroughly. Okay, that's the first thing. You investigate, right? You find out all the facts. You got to do this thoroughly. If it's true and the matter is established that this abomination has been done among you, you shall surely strike the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying it and all that is in it and its cattle with the edge of the sword. Okay, and it goes on. Well, let's read some more. Then you shall gather all its booty into the middle of its open square and burn the city and all its booty with fire as a whole burnt offering to the Lord your God, and it shall be a ruin forever. By the way, that is exactly what will happen to the city of Gabia. The city of Gabia itself becomes a burnt offering. In fact, the word for burnt offering is used of Gabia. So basically what I'm saying is that while this passage in Deuteronomy was specified for pagans, unbelievers, and it's the specifications of holy war, they are going to carry out holy war against their own people. Okay? But most specifically, and the most important thing at this point, is that they need to investigate and search out and inquire thoroughly. Inquire thoroughly means you really ask every question you can possibly be asked to find out all the facts of the case, right? So let's go back now and see if they did that in Judges chapter 20, verse 4. So the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said this. So they said, okay, how did this wickedness happen? How did this woman get murdered? He says, I'm going to ask you, is this what happened? I came with my concubine to spend the night at Gabia. True or false? Yeah, that's true. That's true. Which belongs to Benjamin. That's true. Gabia belongs to Benjamin. But the men of Gabia rose against me and surrounded the house at night because of me. True or false? That's true too. That's true. They intended to kill me. True or false? Maybe. Maybe not. We don't know. I mean, we know what they definitely intended to do. they definitely intended, homosexual activity. Okay, we don't know if they intended to kill him. That's presupposed on the basis that his concubine returned and she was dead, right? And then he says, instead, they ravished my concubine so that she died. Okay, and that's all that he says. Well, basically, he says, I took hold of my concubine and I cut her in pieces and sent her throughout the land of Israel's inheritance. That's also true. So we're here because they've committed a lewd and disgraceful act in Israel. Those two words, lewd and disgraceful, are both references, Hebrew words, for sexual sins that under Mosaic law merited capital punishment. They're death sentences, yes. And so he says in verse 7, behold, all you sons of Israel, give your advice and counsel here. Now, I'm just going to say, frankly, it doesn't matter what their advice or counsel is. It doesn't. It only matters what God says. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. It doesn't matter how you reason about it. None of that really matters. What matters is what the Word of God says. And are you going to do what's right in your own eyes, what you think should be done, or are you going to do what God says? Okay. But he says, nevertheless, give your advice and counsel here. So that introduces the thing, but we need to point out that this guy basically lied. He did not tell what happened. He did not say, I neglected to stand up for my concubine and protect her, which is what he should have said. Because had he said that, then he would have been held responsible for his neglect, and this whole thing could have ended right there. Now, more than 65,000 people are going to die because this guy lied. 65,000 people are now going to die because he lied. Because he did what was right in his own eyes to protect himself. Here's another thing. Now, that's the entire investigation, okay? I mean, you've just seen it. They're now going to issue their conclusion about what they should do. Verse 8, then the people all arose as one man. There's the one man again. They're all united. All 11 tribes are united. Saying, not one of us will go to his tent, nor will any of us return to his house. But now this is the thing which we shall do to Gabia. Now they're about to issue their verdict, right? How many witnesses did they get? One. Did they investigate thoroughly? How many did you have to have in Israel to confirm something? Two at least, or three, of course. Now, so did they follow Deuteronomy 13:14, which says, you must conduct your investigation very thoroughly? No, they didn't. No, they just took one guy's word for it. Now the guy, he put a shout out. He sent, a piece of this woman to every tribe. But they could have summoned the old man of Ephraim who had invited them to stay in his home, couldn't they? They could have got a second witness, but they did not investigate thoroughly. This is neglect of the Word of God. This is forsaking the law of Moses. This is not a good situation. Then so verse 8, all the people arose as one man, saying, not one of us will go to his tent, nor will any of us return to his house. But now this is the thing which we will do to Gabia. We will go up against it by lot. So they're going to cast lots, and we will take 10 men out of 100 throughout the tribes of Israel, and 100 out of 1,000, and 1,000 out of 10,000, to supply food for the people. Logistics is everything in warfare, right? So 10% of the troops are going to be dedicated to bringing supplies and food for the other 90% that will go to war. So you can take the 400,000 and you've got 40,000 that are involved then in logistics, and the other 360,000 are involved in the fighting forces. And so that when they come to Gabia of Benjamin, they may punish them for all the disgraceful acts that they have committed in Israel. So they're just going to go up against the city of Gabia, which I consider probably that's a good thing, to go against just one city. So all the men of Israel were gathered against the city. But, I mean, if they had just known the truth from the Levite, they probably never would have done all this. So all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, united as one man. There's the last time it's mentioned, united as one man, where you see 11 of the tribes totally united in a purpose. Okay? Never, ever will you see this again. Then the tribes of Israel sent men through the entire tribe of Benjamin, saying, "What is this wickedness that has taken place among you?" Okay, so they're inquiring. They're giving Benjamin an opportunity to respond, right? Which is wise. Giving them an opportunity to respond. Now, Benjamin didn't attend the meeting, right? They didn't go. So you can suppose 2 or 3 possible reasons why they didn't go. One, you could just say, well, they agreed with the men of Gabia and they were going to stand by their brothers no matter what, Home team, type attitude. Perhaps they felt slighted because this happened in their tribe, and so they didn't want to go because, they felt we're all feeling condemned here because of what a few men did in Gabia. Okay. Whatever the case is, they didn't go to that meeting. It probably would have been a good idea if they had gone to the meeting. So now they're given an opportunity to respond. In verse 13, they say to them, "Now deliver up the men, the worthless fellows in Gabia, that we may put them to death." It was a capital crime. "And remove this wickedness from Israel." But the sons of Benjamin would not listen to the voice of their brothers, the sons of Israel. So they have decided they're going to protect the men of Gabia. Which means, obviously, now we see clearly that all of the tribe of Benjamin were thoroughly Canaanized, and they were going to stand by these guys and what they did. That was life in the tribe of Benjamin in the day. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. They did not recognize God as their king. So verse 14, it's a very sad situation. The sons of Benjamin gathered from the cities to Gabia. Okay, so they're now sending their warriors all to Gabia. That's where the fighting is going to take place. And you can see that on map 4:9. You can see Gabia in red. To go out to battle against the sons of Israel. Now, we already know how many soldiers they have from verse 2 for the sons of Israel. How many is it? 400,000. 10% of which are going to be getting supplies. So, okay, that erases 40,000. It doesn't matter. You got 360,000. Okay. And Benjamin, let's see how many men they filled, verse 15. From the cities on that day, the sons of Benjamin were numbered 26,000 men who draw the sword, besides the inhabitants of Gabia, who were numbered 700 choice men. So 26,700 versus 360,000. Jesus talked about this in the New Testament, right? What king, when he wants to go to battle and realizes his opponent has 20,000 men and he only has 10,000 men, does he not, think about that for just a minute and say, maybe this isn't a good idea. Okay, well, maybe this isn't a good idea just from the natural standpoint. And that's what we're all thinking. We're all thinking, why would you ever send 26,700 soldiers against 360,000? That's silly. Okay, unless you have some special weapons or something. But let's see what happens. Okay. Verse 16, out of all these people, so out of the 26,700, 700 choice men were left-handed. Each one could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. Now, so it's not just the 700 men from Gabia who are these, let's say, left-handed slingers, but 700 out of the 26,700 people that are contributed from all the cities of Benjamin are these left-handed warriors. Now, usually if you were a left-handed warrior, it's considered a disadvantage. But if you had like whole units who were trained left-handed, well, that could be an advantage. And they had obviously trained to be left-handed, specifically for the advantage it would give them in warfare. Each one of them could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. Now these stones, this is not your typical, boyhood sling that, you buy at Walmart and it's got the rubber and you pull it back and you got a little pellet in there. So this is a different type of sling. You actually slung it around and around. And the stone that you would use, which is like what David would have used with Goliath, could be up to a whole pound, and they were able to sling them up to 90 miles per hour. Okay, so this is no joke. Okay, and these guys are what I would consider to be the parallel to a sniper. Okay, in the Army. Okay, or the Marines or whatever. Okay. So, it says they could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. So these guys were bad to the bone, okay? And that word miss, just as prep for Sunday, is the most common Hebrew word for sin. But, of course, here is not sin. To miss the mark is to sin, right? What this is saying, as far as the slinging is, they would not sin. I mean, they didn't miss the mark. They hit the mark. I mean, they hit it. If you were the target, you were hit. That's how skilled they were. So they've got 26,700, and 700 of these are super awesome slingers. 700 others are warriors from Gabia itself. They're also choice men, so they're great warriors. They just were skilled in other sets of weaponry. And so verse 17, then the men of Israel besides Benjamin were numbered 400,000 men who draw the sword. All these were men of war. I mean, there's no novices here. It's 400,000 essentially against 26,700, some of whom are some expert slingers and others are choice warriors. Now, verse 18, the sons of Israel arose, they went up to Bethel and inquired of God, and they said, who shall go up first for us to battle against the sons of Benjamin? And the Lord said, Judah shall go up first. Now, you're going to notice something. There's going to be 3 times they go to the Lord and inquire. This is the first one, okay? Let me ask you a question. Did they ask the Lord, should we go up against them? No, they didn't ask that. They assumed that, and they just said, which tribe should go up first, okay? They're interested in which tribe should lead the other tribes into the battle. But they never asked the Lord, should we go up? I think that's a mistake. I think that's a mistake. They had already decided what they were going to do was right in their own eyes, which was to go up against the Benjamites. The only matter is, which tribe? Maybe we should ask the Lord which tribe, We know what we're going to do. Which tribe should go first and lead us in doing it? And the Lord said, Judah shall go up first. Okay. So the sons of Israel arose in the morning, and they camped against Gabia. The men of Israel went out to battle against Benjamin, and the men of Israel arrayed for battle against them at Gabia. Then the sons of Benjamin came out of Gabia, so outside the city walls, and they fell to the ground on that day 22,000 men of Israel. So the Benjamites won that battle. And right now you're asking, how can this be? Not only how can it be just on a natural level, but why would the Lord permit this to happen? I mean, he told them, Judah should go up first. Something seems amiss. Okay? You're supposed to kind of wonder why. I guarantee you every commentator wonders why. Actually, some of them just totally skip right over it. Because who wants to deal with this problem? First of all, I'm going to say this. I don't think this ever should have happened. Because if the Levite hadn't lied, none of this ever would happen. Okay? It all gets traced back to the fact they did not investigate thoroughly as the Mosaic Law said they should have. The second problem here is they didn't say, should we go up? Should we go against our brother Benjamin?
They just said, who should go first? It's the wrong question again. It's the wrong question. You've already decided what's right in your own eyes to do. Now you're just like, oh, Lord, give us a couple tidbits on how we should do it. So the sons of Benjamin actually end up killing 22,000 men of Israel. There's no report of how many Benjamites were killed here. Okay, but we'll find out there were some killed, but not a lot. For the most part, they had a great day. Verse 22, but the people, the men of Israel, encouraged themselves, and they arrayed for battle again in the place where they had arrayed themselves the first day. So they said, okay, we're not going to be discouraged. We were defeated. 22,000 men died. Bad day. But they still had hope. Okay? And so they're going to do the same thing again. Verse 23, the sons of Israel went up, and they wept before the Lord until evening, and they inquired of the Lord, saying, shall we again draw near for battle against the sons of my brother Benjamin? I mean, they were a little like, did we do the right thing? And should we stay on this course? Should we go up against Benjamin? Are we doing the right thing? And the Lord said, okay, go up against him. Okay, all right. So verse 24, second battle, right? Then the sons of Israel came against the sons of Benjamin the second day. And Benjamin went out against them from Gabia the second day, and fell to the ground again 18,000 men of the sons of Israel. All these drew the sword. So these are all warriors. And it wasn't 22,000, but it was 18,000. So now we've got 40,000 men of Israel have been killed by the Benjamites. And again, you're saying, I thought it was the Benjamites who did bad and permitted this thing to happen in Israel. And are standing up for it. And won't turn the men of Gabia over. Maybe the other tribes were not guiltless after all in the Lord's sight. Who is the standard for what is right and just? Who? God is the standard. Who knows all things? Only God. So do you think not that perhaps that there is justice of God being implemented here? Besides, they had not really investigated thoroughly anyway. They're going on a single witness, which was totally contrary to the Mosaic Law. So we can definitely say they're not without guilt. We know that. Verse 26. Then all the sons of Israel and all the people went up, and they came to Bethel, and they wept. And thus they remained there before the Lord, and now they fast, which is to humble themselves that day, until evening. They offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. Now they hadn't done that before, so they have recognized, obviously, well, we've done something wrong. So verse 27, the sons of Israel inquired of the Lord, and it says, for the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days, that is in Bethel, which is a little strange, but anyway, that's what it says. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, Aaron's son, stood before it to minister in those days. So this time they're like, we're going to the high priest. I mean, let's find out what we should do. And they said, shall I yet again, third day, go out to battle against the sons of my brother Benjamin, or shall I cease? I mean, is this the end of the war? I mean, because this does not look good for us. We've lost 40,000 guys. And the Lord said, go. Now, this is the only time he says this. Go up, for tomorrow I will deliver them into your hand. Did he say the other days, I will deliver them into your hand? No, he just said, Judah should go first. And then the second battle, he said, go up. But he didn't tell them what was going to happen. This is the thing about God's Word. What does it say? What does it actually say? Here's a case where he told them something and they assumed certain things. But God didn't say those things. They just assumed. And that's the thing with the Bible. You have to be very, very, very careful with assumptions. We all do it. I'm totally guilty. But you have to be careful with assumptions and implications. And you have to go with what is there. And this is the first time, he didn't say the second day, oh, go up and you're going to have victory. He just said, go up against him. That was basically his verdict of, you're going to get destroyed. But they didn't assume that. They assumed, oh, that means we're going to have victory. That is an assumption, right? They assumed that. They were wrong. And here, for the first time, he says, okay, go up. Tomorrow I will deliver them into your hand. Now, they know that they will have victory. So, notice verse 29. Here they have a different strategy. So Israel set men in ambush around Gabia. It's going to be an ambush. The sons of Israel went up against the sons of Benjamin on the third day and arrayed themselves against Gabia as at other times. So it's like everything looks just like it has the previous 2 days of battle. Okay, we're doing everything the same. Okay, except they stuck these guys in ambush. Okay, and this battle looks a lot like another battle that we studied in the book of Joshua. And when they went up against this city in the book of Joshua chapter 7, they got defeated. Israel got defeated by the people of Ai, the city of Ai. And then in chapter 8, they set an ambush. And they drew the men of Ai out of the city. And then some men went into the city and took the city, and they set it on fire. And then they had them surrounded on both sides, and they killed the rest of the people of Ai. This is a carbon copy. This is a carbon copy. Okay, they're using the same strategy that was used in the days of Joshua. So interesting. They studied military warfare down through history. They learned certain strategies, and they're using those strategies. Okay, so they set the men in ambush around Gabia. Sons of Israel went up against the sons of Benjamin the third day. They arrayed themselves just like at other times. Everything looks the same as far as the people of Benjamin are concerned. Verse 31, the sons of Benjamin went out against the people, and they're drawn away from the city. And they began to strike, and they began to kill some of the people of Israel, just like the other days, right? Along the highways, one of which goes up to Bethel, and the other to Gabia. And in the field, they kill about 30 men of Israel. And so the sons of Benjamin said, ha ha, we have the upper hand. Okay, they're struck down before us, as at the first. So, in other words, we've got it. The battle is ours. But the sons of Israel said, okay, let us flee that we may draw them away from the city to the highways. So they're going to keep moving away from the city as if they're afraid. Verse 33, then all the men of Israel arose from their place and arrayed themselves at Baal Tamar. And the men of Israel in ambush broke out of their place, even out of Mareh Gabah, which we don't know where that place is. At any rate, it was a place. When 10,000 choice men from all Israel came against Gabia, the battle became fierce. But Benjamin did not know that disaster was close to them. And the Lord struck Benjamin before Israel, so that the sons of Israel destroyed 25,100 men of Benjamin that day, all who draw the sword. Okay, how many warriors did they start with, by the way? 26,700. Okay? And they destroyed on that day 25,100. Okay? So, verse 36. And some of this is going to recapitulate, kind of tell us a little bit more about the battle. So the sons of Benjamin saw that they were defeated. Yeah, they realized that. When the men of Israel gave ground to Benjamin, okay, so as they're fleeing, because they relied on the men in ambush whom they had set against Gabia. So the men in ambush are actually going to go to the city of Gabia. They're going to attack the city once most of the warriors of Gabia have been drawn away. So verse 37, the men in ambush hurried and rushed against Gabia, the city. And the men in ambush also deployed and struck all the city with the edge of the sword. Now the appointed sign between the men of Israel and the men in ambush was that they would make a great cloud of smoke rise from the city. So, once they had drawn the Benjamite warriors far enough away from Gabia, then the ambush would go into the city, strike it with the edge of the sword, send up a cloud of smoke, right? That would be the signal to the men who are fleeing, okay, stop fleeing, turn around and fight, because we're now coming out of the city behind them. You're in front of them. We'll have them surrounded. Verse 39, then the men of Israel turned in the battle Okay, this is when they're turning actually to flee here. And Benjamin began to strike and kill about 30 men of Israel. We've already saw that. I told you some of this to recapitulate. For they said, surely they are defeated before us as in the first battle. But when the cloud began to rise from the city in a column of smoke, Benjamin looked behind them, and behold, the whole city was going up in smoke to heaven. Okay, this is when they realized they got a problem. So verse 41, then the men of Israel turned, so now they're turning back toward the city of Gabia, and the men of Benjamin were terrified, for they saw that disaster was close to them. They say, well, my goodness, they've already taken the city, and now all these warriors have turned to us on this side. We're surrounded on every side. Verse 42, therefore they turned their backs before the men of Israel toward the direction of the wilderness. I mean, they're just trying to escape now. But the battle overtook them, while those who came out of the cities destroyed them in the midst of them. I mean, they're just getting demolished. Verse 43, so they surrounded Benjamin, pursued them without rest, and trod them down opposite Gabia toward the east. So everything is now going to move toward the east. These guys are fleeing down toward the Jordan Valley, out of the hill country, trying to escape toward the east. And verse 44 reports that 18,000 men of Benjamin fell, all valiant warriors. It says the rest turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon, but they caught 5,000 of them on the highway. It means they destroyed them. They killed them on the spot. And overtook them at Gittim and killed 2,000 of them. So at Gittim, which is another unknown city by archaeology, we don't know where it is, they killed another 2,000. So you've got 18,000 plus 5,000, which is 23,000, plus another 2,000, which is 25,000. And so verse 46 reports all of Benjamin who fell that day were 25,000 men who draw the sword. All these were valiant warriors. Okay. And then we get a report about an interesting group of Benjamites that'll be important for the next chapter, the final chapter. But 600 men, 600 Benjamites, turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon, and they remained at the rock of Rimmon 4 months. So 600 men of Benjamin actually escaped. Okay. In verse 48, the men of Israel then turned back. Okay, so they stopped pursuing those 600 men. They just let them go. And they turned back against the sons of Benjamin and struck them with the edge of the sword, both the entire city of Gabia, with the cattle and all that they found. And then it says they also set on fire all the cities which they found. So they went throughout the whole tribe of Benjamin, okay, through all the cities of Benjamin, and they killed everybody. Man, woman, child, sheep, goat, it didn't matter. Because what you just saw in chapter 20 is the 11 tribes not just having a civil war, but literally holy war against their brother. And they weren't supposed to do that. They were not supposed to exercise holy war against their own brothers. Let me get the passage. I've got it in the notes, but, well, it's in the notes. I get away from my notes and then... Now, what we just saw is a horrible atrocity that could have totally been avoided if they investigated thoroughly and found out what this guy, this Levite, had really done. Now, of course, the men of Gabia were also culpable for what they did, but I think things would have turned out really different if they had investigated thoroughly and not taken one witness. But because they did, over 65,000 people, over 65,000 men, over 65,000 soldiers died. I don't know how that makes you feel, but if you were a wife or a kid of one of these fathers, and it was really all unnecessary, it should make you angry. But look, this is a time when everybody did what was right in their own eyes. There was no king recognized in Israel because they didn't recognize God and His Word. They just did whatever they wanted to do. Now, there are a couple things, just interesting things just to sort out, just so we understand. First of all, how do we reconcile the fact that verse 15 says there was 26,700 soldiers from Benjamin, and verse 47 says 600 of them escaped? Okay, so I've got my pencil died. So you got 26,700, okay, total. 600 escaped, so they lived, right? They went to this rock of Rimmon. So 26,700 minus 600 gives you how much? 26,100, okay, that were killed. But the text in verse 35 says only 25,100 were killed. Right? It says 25,100. I thought it was 26,100. How many is it? Is it 25,100 or 26,100? What about the other 1,000 soldiers? They were killed in the earlier two battles, okay? They just weren't reported. The numbers weren't reported. But obviously they suffered some casualties. Okay? So 1,000, that's how you account for those 1,000. Okay? Now, how do we reconcile this? Verse 46 says 25,000 were killed. Verse 35 says 25,100. So it's a 100 difference. How do we sort that out? Well, one is probably just a rounded off number, 25,000. The other is a more specific number. Okay, that's not. We all do the same thing. How many people were killed in 9/11? How many times do you give the exact number? Oh, you usually about 3,000. That's what you'll usually say, something like that. You won't say, well, it's 2,894. So this is a normal way people talk. It's the same way we talk, but somehow, for some reason, when people come to the Bible, oh, it's got an error. Well, these people make the same errors every day in their life. Okay, they do the same type of thing. They talk exactly the same way. It's silliness. Okay. Now, the important thing is, what are the three things that we can learn from this? This is a very interesting chapter. It's a terrible chapter, but what are some things we can learn? First thing I think we can learn is this. Even when we think we are in the right, just going by our own noodle up here. Okay? That's what the sons of Israel did. They didn't investigate thoroughly. They heard one side say, oh, this has got to be it. We got to take care of this. Take care of business. Well, that does not give you liberty to pursue justice without consulting the Lord. They should have consulted with the Lord. They exercised liberty they did not have the right to exercise. The law carefully spelled out, you must thoroughly investigate the situation, and there must be 2 or 3 witnesses, and they totally ignored that. Thousands and thousands of lives could have been saved if they just investigated thoroughly and questioned the old man of Ephraim, whose house this all happened at, but they didn't even do that. That is neglect. It is not justice, it is injustice. Instead, they just did what was right in their own eyes, and almost we're going to find out, exterminated an entire tribe of Israel. There are literally only 600 men left, because every man, woman, and child in all the other cities was destroyed. Now, what do you think will happen if we don't, if we do the same thing and we don't investigate thoroughly when there's some injustice? Obviously, some injustice happened. We know that. But what if we don't investigate thoroughly? As Christians, shouldn't we investigate things thoroughly to make sure we have all the facts before we issue a decision? I don't know how many times I've been in counseling. I've got this man over here. I've got this woman over here. Usually it always starts with one of them. Okay? And I hear these stories. And these stories are like, oh my goodness, this woman is completely out of line. Then, if I can talk to this woman, I listen to this woman, and the conclusion is, man, this guy is totally out of line. Okay? And the bottom line is that both parties are at fault, right? But if you just listen to one side of the story, I promise you are not hearing the whole story. Never. I've never seen it. Yes? It looks like they made an emotional decision right from the start. Yeah, well, and it is emotional, right? You get, somebody sends a part of a person to you in the mail. I mean, obviously, that's a tendency, and you just emotionalize, and yeah, I totally agree. They did not investigate thoroughly enough. They did not let reason and logic and facts control. They let them, this person's been killed, and just move on. Okay, we are supposed to get the whole story. We're supposed to consult God's word and not make a rash judgment, because when you do, look what happens. 65,000 people died. Second thing, the Benjamites decided that they were going to show more loyalty to their family members, let's just say kin, or their blood, okay, than they showed to God. What is going to happen if we, as Christians, show more loyalty to our family members? This is a tough one for everybody. What if you show more loyalty to your family members than you do to God? Well, what happened to Benjamin? They were destroyed, practically destroyed. What will happen to our families if we show more loyalty to our family than we do to God? It will destroy our families. It will destroy our family. Do you want your family destroyed? People think that by showing loyalty to their family, they're going to preserve their family. The story of Benjamin shows us exactly the opposite. If you try to preserve your family and you forsake the Lord in the process of doing so, you end up destroying your family. The proverb says, sow the wind, reap the whirlwind, right? And they sowed the wind when they decided to pick Benjamin over God. And as a consequence, they reaped destruction. So there are consequences of putting loyalty to, let's say, family or blood before God. We should always put God first, even if it means we have to part ways with family. You say, but that's really hard. Yeah, I know. I know that's hard. I know that's hard. But what did Jesus say when he came in the Gospels? I came to divide a mother against a daughter, a father against a son. What was he saying? He's saying, hey, you have to choose sides here. Is family more important to you, or am I and God more important to you? You know, and in the end, he's the only one that matters, right? I want all my family to love the Lord and walk with the Lord. I want that. But if they decide they're going to go the other way, I can't go down that path. I can't condone that. I can't walk with that and walk with God at the same time. I just can't do that. It hurts, but it hurts far worse to choose family over God. That's what this story is about, part of it. The last thing, the third thing, the only bright spot in the story is a little town called Bethlehem. You say, but it doesn't take a prominent place in the story. I know. It's just the first few verses in chapter 19 discuss Bethlehem, and the concubine went to her father at Bethlehem, and the Levite went to retrieve his concubine at Bethlehem, and he received hospitality, which was a preeminent virtue in the ancient world. Everything else in the story is a disaster. Especially Benjamin. But what's the point? Why did Samuel write this? Samuel's the author of Judges. He's writing a couple of centuries later, 2 or 3 centuries later, 3 centuries probably later. Why did he write this story? He is making an apologetic for the Davidic dynasty against Saul's dynasty. He is clearly casting the tribe of Israel the tribe of Benjamin in a very negative light, right? Gosh, that's a terrible tribe. Who comes from the tribe of Benjamin? Saul. Yeah. And at the same time, he casts Bethlehem in a very positive light. And who comes from Bethlehem? Well, before Jesus, who comes? David. David's going to be from Bethlehem. So the pro-David sentiment is the main part of the story. Even while this is going on, there's more going on at the same time in Israel's history, because there's a third story about Bethlehem in the trilogy. And that's the story of a gal named Naomi, another gal named Ruth, and a guy named Boaz. And that story shows us the line of the Messiah. So, do you see God behind all of this in history? Like as a great orchestrator. It's so much, there's the details and the things that we saw as application, okay? You can think you're right, but you didn't thoroughly investigate enough and you're wrong, and that's silly to do that. That's a good lesson. There's another lesson here. Don't show more loyalty to family or others than to the Lord. That's a good lesson. But do you see that while those are lessons, there's this bigger story going on in history that God is trying to accomplish something. And in this case, it's messianic. He's setting Bethlehem up. You know, when the wise men came in Matthew 2 and they said, where is they came to Jerusalem, where is the Messiah to be born? And the scribes come and they say, well, it says in Micah 5:2, he's to be born in Bethlehem Ephrathah, right? They could have just as well started to describe the story of Bethlehem from Judges and Ruth to prove that the Messiah would be from Bethlehem. It just could have as well done that, because it's just as convincing, if not more so, that this little tiny town, too little to be numbered among the clans of Judah, it says, yet would be the birthplace of the King of the world. And so it is. But you see, it's all in motion. And it's a beautiful picture of history and how you use history, how God looks at history to teach us about what he's up to. Okay. So enough of that. Let's close with a word of prayer, and then we'll have some prayer requests. Heavenly Father, thank you that you are at work in history. Sometimes we can't see. It's too big. And there's too much going on. We cannot filter through all the data and see the points that are the most important. But you show us in this story that you are doing that there are things happening, often unnoticed, that are the key moments in history, and they may not be what we pick out. So help us to be impressed with you, that indeed you're the God of all history, and you're working something wonderful. And somehow we're a part of it. We're built into it. Help us to not be like the men of Israel and not pay attention to your word and fail to execute justice by being careful inquisitors. Help us to have our loyalty ultimately to you and to you only. And help us to see your messianic purposes through all of history. It's a wonderful plan. We give you all praise and glory for these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. All right. What additional prayer requests do we have this week? Melinda, can you take them down for Megan? She's not here. Okay. You have one? Okay.
Carol and Darjani said they're not here tonight. Matt's aunt Marilee is in her final days, hours, so they're praying for a good transition, and for her husband Michael. It would be hard on him.
Okay, yeah. So they're taking care of her and Michael. They live out at Carolyn and Matt's place. But yeah, she's in her last hours. She's a believer, so she's a strong believer. She's just going to graduate soon, sooner probably than expected. So pray for them. And Michael, who also lives there, that'll be hard for him. And I think her sister's down, right? Maida is down?
I don't know.
I think she's down from Alaska. Anyway, so yeah, pray for them. Obviously going to keep praying for Linda and the Kennedy family. As many of you know, she had her best day on Monday since probably January. So we're praying for more days like that, right? And that they'll know the right time for her to be released so she doesn't have to get readmitted or anything like that. That they can
be very confident that she can go home and that that will happen soon. Anything else in addition to that, Todd? Anything else? Or is that good? Okay. Good. And for maybe strength. Anything else? Yes? Wanda?
Tish and Tyler are working really hard this week to get their house on the market. They'd like to be able to sell it, not the one they're living in, but they have a rental.
That's right. He told me about that. Okay, so yeah, Stacia and Tyler are trying to get a house ready to sell, so if they want to get it on the market this week. Probably won't have any problem selling it, right? It's just who to sell to these days, I don't know. But there's a lot to get done. Okay, anything else? Okay, well, you can always pray for me. I think I got MRI on Saturday night at 9 p.m., so hopefully I'll find out what to do. So it's not really any better. Okay, let's go pray.